This project started a few months ago after I moved into my new place and noticed the speed at which the traffic was passing by. And for us adults it's not such a big deal, because we are aware of the dangers, but for my kids and others around here, it can be seriously dangerous. So I tried to make people aware of their speed with this well-known yellow slowdown figure. But instead it seemed like they thought I put it there to encourage them to drive even faster. And I think that's because everyone knows that there are no consequences if they speed by this thing anyway. So maybe it's time for a different approach. That's why today we're going to turn this concept idea into this. This is Jake, a future-proof version of the yellow slowdown figure, but with some hidden building consequences. This video is sponsored by Battery Hookup, your #1 source for affordable and sustainable batteries. Since Jake was going to be mostly 3D printed, this project started in CAD. And I didn't want to give him legs or wheels like most other robots. Instead, I wanted to make it look like he's flying, to make him really stand out at the side of the road. But making him actually fly would be practically impossible. So instead, I decided to mount him on a plexiglass pole. Since the plexiglass is crystal clear, it should be barely visible from a distance and hopefully create the illusion that he's hovering in mid-air. Unfortunately, by the time I finished the design, the diameter pipe that I needed was sold out. And I did have a leftover piece from another project, but it was much shorter than what I actually needed. Luckily, after some fitting and measuring, it turned out to be just long enough for the part between him and the ground. And since the rest of the pipe wouldn't be visible anyway, I could extend it with some standard PVC pipe. With this problem fixed, he was off the ground now. But it still didn't really look like he was flying. And I think that's because something that's hovering in the air always seems to be dancing a little bit. To add this dancing movement, I added some threaded rods and cut some spacers to length for a bracket on which the stepper motor with a spindle could be mounted. Now, with the spindle in combination with a nut mounted inside the pipe, we can make Jake dance up and down by letting the stepper motor turn left or right. The only problem now is that if I don't stop him, he wants to start spinning due to the friction between the spindle and the nut. To solve this, I mounted 2 long straight keys so the gear that will come around it can move up and down but can't rotate. And to ensure the gear always moves up and down at the correct height, I added a ring that can freely rotate relative to the gear. By then mounting this ring to the body and adding a motor driven gear, we can make Jake dance up and down without him spinning unintentionally. And we can rotate the body towards oncoming traffic by driving that gear. Since the plexiglass pipe was a bit too short, the grey PVC pipe is visible at the bottom. To hide that, I want to try and create a fake flame that seems to shoot out from below, making it look like he's hovering by using a jet engine. To create a flame-like effect, I added 3 small brushless motors from an old drone. And since I didn't have the propellers anymore, I 3D printed some in the hope that they wouldn't explode at high speed. I also glued a few high-power LEDs to the bottom. Some red and blue in the middle and a few orange ones around the outside. To diffuse the light from the LEDs, I cut a few sheets of bubble wrap into the shape of a flame and taped them to a 3D printed ring that I could then mount to the bottom. And since I had no idea if what I had in mind would even work, I was pretty happy when I saw this result. His secret weapon is hidden behind the 2 doors in his chest. And I could have chosen to use standard hinge doors, of course, but that wouldn't fit his somewhat futuristic appearance, I thought. So instead, I spent way too much time designing this mechanism with a small servo in each door so they can open and close automatically in a more suitable, futuristic way. Once the doors are open, the weapon rotates out. And the way this happens is pretty neat. The shaft on which the weapon rotates has a groove along its entire length. Inside the weapon is a screw whose head extends just beyond the inner diameter, so he could follow the groove. So as the weapon rotates, it not only spins, but also slides in or out. This means we can achieve all these movements with just one motor. To be able to shoot, I decided to use air pressure. So he will need some kind of an air pump, an air tank, pressure sensor, and of course a valve to be able to release all the compressed air all at once. To connect all these things as compact as possible with minimum chance on leakage, I designed 2 custom connectors and had them CNC machined from aluminum by PCBWay.com, the go-to place for high quality PCB prototyping and manufacturing, whether you're working on a DIY project or a professional build. PCBWay.com offers reliable, affordable and fast services. Visit PCBWay.com and bring your ideas to life today. To compress the air, we'll use a small portable battery powered compressor. The compressor pumps air into this small PET bottle, which serves as the air tank. And to release the air all at once, I added a small solenoid valve that can be opened and closed by applying an electrical signal. And since I had no idea how powerful the system would be, I also didn't know yet what it should be firing. So, to get an idea of the damage it could cause, I first printed a few of these. Let's load one up and see what happens. 3, 2, 1. Okay, that looks like it could do some serious damage. Let's see what it does to this bottle of water. 3, 2, 1. Yep, that's way too powerful. I'm not planning to pay for damage caused by every single shot. So we needed something to fire that would cause less damage. And after a quick round through my workshop, this is what I found. And it might just work. It's soft, so it can't cause any real damage. And it will be a good lesson for those speeding maniacs. But because the paint is water-based, it will also easily come off. To test it, I drilled a small hole in the barrel and printed a sleeve that can cover the hole after loading, so the paint wouldn't spray back out when we fire. Let's load some paint and see if this works. Three, 2, 1. But as you can imagine, I wasn't planning on reloading this way after every shot. So it would be great if we could automate it. To be able to load the paint automatically, we need some kind of a reservoir and a way to get the paint from the reservoir into the barrel. I had a few of these large syringes left over from my previous project, and I thought one of these could perfectly serve as the paint reservoir. To get the paint from the reservoir into the barrel, we could use a pump. However, I didn't want to place a pump between the reservoir and the barrel, causing the paint to go through the pump and so most likely clog it if the paint dries. Instead, I wanted to try using a small air pump like this to build pressure from the top and so pushing the paint through the tube into the barrel. But to build pressure, the top of the reservoir must be airtight. Fortunately, I could use the standard piston seal of the syringe and just poke a small hole through it for the air pump hose. The only problem left is that the compressor uses manual push buttons to start. And because the compressor will be mounted inside of Jake, we can't access the buttons after everything is put together. So we need to find a solution for that too. To turn the compressor on, the middle button needs to be pressed and held for at least 3 seconds, and then pressed again to start pumping. To do this remotely, I first needed to figure out which contacts of the push button were used so I could solder some wires to them. This way, we should be able to bridge the push button if we connect those wires to a relay which we can control with one of the onboard Arduinos. To communicate with passing traffic, Jet Jake not only uses a LED display, but he also has a few RGB LED rings behind his eyes and ears. This way we could turn them green for drivers who stick to the speed limit, or flash them blue and red like police lights for those who are speeding, for example. And finally, since his left arm didn't have a function yet, I thought it would be fun to add a motor so he can point to his gun as a fun little extra warning. And here's a tip for mounting a 3D printed gear onto a motor shaft. If you take a standard timing belt pulley, like this GT2 one, you can pull off the front flange and then melt it into the gear with a soldering iron for a super strong and reliable connection. To be able to easily control the position of the arm, I chose to use the motor driver from one of those standard servos and just replace the potentiometer with one that's easier to mount in the custom 3D printed parts. I also left a small slot to glue in the motor driver, keeping everything tidy. We can then mount everything onto the arm hub and slide the arm hub back in place. And finally, mount the bracket that holds the shaft of the potentiometer in place while the arm rotates. Because Jake needs to know which direction traffic is coming from and what their speed is, there are two ultrasonic sensors a bit further down the road on either side of him. To calculate the speed of a passing car, we measure the time between the moment a car passes the first sensor and the moment it passes the second sensor. With this time and the known distance of exactly 2.5 meters between the sensors, the Arduino that both sensors are connected to can calculate the car's exact speed in kilometer or mile per hour. Once the speed is calculated, the Arduino forwards the information to Jake via a wireless 433 MHz connection to let him know which side traffic is coming from and what their speed is. And now he knows that, it's finally time to see him in action. Oh, and don't forget to let me know whether you think Jake will be a good addition to the police force, or if it's better for him to start looking for another job as soon as possible. you.